tuning in to my first episode. Today's show features Claude Guillaumaud-Pujol, a French professor of American Studies, author, activist against what she believes to be the unjust incarceration of MOVE members in Mumia Abu-Jamal. In our interview, Claude gives a lot of details about her involvement in the cases of these people who are widely known. However, let me explain to you who they are in case you are unfamiliar. The MOVE organization is a family of Black revolutionaries who follow the guideline principles of John Africa. Their beliefs include a natural law philosophy of life that is governed by God and not man-made laws. Their way of living has made a lot of people uncomfortable, including the Philadelphia police, who have targeted them for decades. In 1978, Philly police violently entered the home of the MOVE members in an attempt to arrest them. Shots rang off and a police officer was killed. MOVE members have maintained their innocence. However, 9 members were convicted and sentenced for the officer's murder. In 1981, and after years of reporting on what he believed to be the unjust harassment experienced by MOVE members from the police, Philadelphia journalist Mumia Abu-Jamal was charged with killing a police officer. He, along with thousands of supporters around the world, maintained his innocence. In 1985, the Philadelphia police returned to the MOVE home, this time with a bomb. And for the first and only time in American history, the government dropped the bomb on civilians on American soil, killing 11 MOVE members, 6 adults, and 5 children. Years later, Claude learned of these cases while studying for a PhD at Temple University in Philadelphia. Eager to find out the truth, Claude contacted members of the MOVE, and the rest is history. Today, we learn her story. So good morning. Today, I'm joined with Claude Guillaumaud-Pujol, who is a French citizen and a longtime supporter of Mumia Abu-Jamal. Good morning.
Good morning, Channel. I'm glad to welcome you in Paris because we met a long time ago in Philly, I remember. Right. And it was nice to see you here and talk about Mumia, of course.
Right. It's great to see you here on this side of the pond. Yeah. Speaking of us meeting in Philly, I think we met in about, 2010 or 2011 in Philly when Mumia, his case was before the federal court when his lawyers were challenging his death sentence, and they were successful and able to have that sentence commuted to life.
Yeah.
So tell me, but before we get to speaking about Mumia, I want to learn a little more about you. What was the first social justice case that turned you from a bystander into a bona fide activist?
Well, it's difficult to say. First thing, you've got to realize that I went to the US very late. I've been teaching British studies, then finally I switched to American studies after 1990 because I got Fulbright scholarship to go to Philadelphia. Okay,
wow.
That's how I ended in Philadelphia, just by chance, nothing planned. I was never involved in prison in France before, anything like that. And I got this scholarship, which I was very happy to have, and was sent to Temple University. And it was for French teachers. We had 2 teachers per country chosen every year, And can you imagine, because we had all this great idea about America, which is a beautiful country, I must say, but we ended in the North Philly ghetto because Temple University is North Philly ghetto.
It definitely
so
is.
It was very hot, it was summer, and we were supposed not to go out of the Temple University by ourselves,
Yeah.
And it was so scary with the shock of our life. Some of the teachers wanted to leave, We had no idea there could be ghettos in the US,
Yeah.
We are that naive, Well, that was 1990s, and we were still in this idea that, with the civil rights campaign, civil rights acts, everything was much better in the US,
Mm-hmm.
And here we're straight into the ghetto, Temple University, probably. So it was a beautiful course, of course, about American studies, and but I was switched to American study, and then I wrote my PhD about Philadelphia, a couple of years later. And talking with the professors after the classes, one of the professors told me about, the MOVE bombing. That's, I got involved with the Mumia story. MOVE bombing in 1985, and I remember I was in the U.S. in 1995. I was in Springfield, Missouri as a chaplain, and nobody ever mentioned that, and I was amazed at the fact that we never heard about it. I wanted to know more about it. So I came back 2 years later, and by that time I was teaching American Studies in a French university in Tours. And as early as 1992, I met Pam Africa. I must say I was scared to death because I'd read all the newspaper about, the move people and how wild they were and all that. Well, okay, but I say, because I was writing my first year of PhD, but I say I've got to meet these people. But you know what? None of my friends wanted to come and visit Pam, None of them were anarchists from the A Space in Philadelphia. And they let me go by myself, just French woman. No, in Philly,
You're referring to your American friends. None of your American friends wanted to meet them.
Yes, okay. No, but that's what shocks me. But because most of my American friends in Philly, which are very progressive, they still this kind of cleavage between white and black people. And anyway, I just went. I was terrified. I remember. I knock on the door. I called Pam in advance. It was Pam and Mo. I knock on the door and I just say, I couldn't even speak English. I say, I'm French. I'll never be a member of a Move family, but I want to know about your story. Yeah. And Pam, she's very nice. Mo is very nice. She said, just be quiet. We're going to tell you the story. They got me watermelon and water and started talking about the Move prisoner and all that. And Mo, it was so nice. We're so nice. Nothing like the story you read in the newspaper. Mm-hmm. Totally different, So I said, I'm going to support you. I'm going to do whatever I can to help you, okay? Just, as a French person, not mingled into American affairs. You've got to be very respectful of what's going on in one country. So the next year I wrote my first paper about for my research, and I got to meet South Africa, and with a picture of Tommaso, her son was been killed in 1985. I always remember seeing Sue, and Sue telling me, on the terrace of a house, this is my son, And after I met Mona, which was been released a year before, and I starting with my own student, because I was teaching at Tours University at that time, I starting a group with my students, the volunteer ones. After the classes, of course. No way, you are not supposed as a teacher to get your student involved in your personal commitment. And that's how we started what we call Just Justice Tour. Mm-hmm. With this Diarafa, Diarafa, yes. Her father is from Mali, her mother is French, and she's been one of my students for many years in high school, then in university. Now she's teaching English in Mali, French lycée, and she comes back on a regular basis, And she was.
And this is you and Angela Davis.
Yes,
and her.
Angela Davis.
Nice.
When Mumia was given the French citizenship in Paris, And so we happened to be the only French support group mentioned in Mumia's first book, And that was Just Justice Tour. You see? Can you see?
Yeah.
We are the only French people involved in 1994 and 1995. And that's Mumia's first book.
Okay.
So my students were very committed, and we were meeting at home in no place. I can show you a picture later if you're interested. And so when PCRA came in 1995, of course, I joined the Move family, and we all went to court. And I didn't know much about Mumia, to be honest. I didn't know much about Black Panther, except what you read in the newspaper. And my point of view was, my thoughts were that it was probably a self-defense. Mumia was probably guilty, but self-defense or protecting his young brother, Right. You've got to realize that July the 4th, 1995 was the first very big meeting for Mumia in Paris. And we used to meet next to the embassy, where you probably looked for us the other day, but they moved us to the consulate. That's to say, we are just under Musée de l'Orangerie, behind the colonnade, and that's where we've been meeting every Wednesday night from 1995 up to 213, I would say.
Right.
As long as it was on death row. and now it's only once a month, the first Wednesday of the month. So that's what I got in court with all the moved people, of course, in Philadelphia court with Judge Sabo. It was very scary, and I didn't know much about American penal law, you know, and I didn't understand half of what was said in court, except that the next day we had all the story in the newspaper. But it was a very, very strong movement. I'm really glad I was there, and we heard all the witnesses, the new witnesses, and I really realized that Mumia was not guilty. Okay, but he wasn't guilty. He knew what happened, was not guilty. And I realized how powerful an American judge can be. How powerful it can be. I remember Sabo, I couldn't believe it, because I was talking with Pam and Mona, and the judge, the witness was saying Mumia was on the ground, it was okay, and it was a fourth person running from the place, but two persons, they said at the beginning, kind of street priest, and also Mumia's friend, the one who was killed in 1985 during the move bombing. Okay, we know that Mumia is innocent with all this testimony, and when I would say, no, Claude, if a judge doesn't want to recognize these witnesses, you know, he will get rid of it, and nothing will happen. I just couldn't believe it. You know?
Well, that's really the final decision of the judge, but I'm sure that the testimony that was rejected that you're referring to was objected by the prosecutor, and the judge has the final say to either accept that testimony or reject it, and then the judge. Yeah,
that's what you call the discriminatory right of a judge, you know, which is something. Discretionary power of a judge, which is something amazing for me, you know. So I went to all this event. That's where I got to know most of Mumia's friends and supporters, and Noel from that time, and many more people. And that's what I got involved. And I told as well the move prisoner as Mumia is. As long as I'm alive, I'll try to do whatever I can to see you walk free people.
Wow. So your activism started with the Mumia case. So that's been
the move people.
And the
move people. Wow. 1993. You know
that. And that's actually kind of surprising to me, because you're French, and French people are notorious for being, you know, the phrase is bleeding heart, meaning that you're very concerned about social justice and human rights. So I would think that being French, you already had a background as maybe a protester, an advocate of human rights, because that's so common here. But so it's interesting to learn that Mumia is actually the first case that sparked your interest.
I was much involved in French politics. Okay, I was member of the Socialist Party from 1970 to 1990 for 20 years. And after, I think that they never did what they promised to do, so I just resigned. I'm the 68th generation. You know, I'm 68th generation. But my political awakening was in 68, you know.
Yeah.
Because I was teaching in a very huge high school, 5,000 students, 300 teachers. And we really had our own revolution in a small provincial city, which is Tours, which is my home city. Then moved to political party, member of Socialist Party. We built this party, you know, together with Communist Party. And I was working, I was married, I had 2 kids, and also I met 2 kids, my 2 daughters very young. So I was graduating, I was STEM teachers and all that. So you can't do everything, okay?
Yeah, that's true. So, but I understand now. So your history is more into politics, but Mumia's case puts you more in line with, I guess, the other side. So not the political side, but more of the people's movement. And for Mumia, you had mentioned a little while ago that Mumia has French citizenship.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
Well, the most famous citizenship is Paris. His citizenship is a French citizen in Paris. He's a French citizen in something like 20 cities. I don't have the list exactly here, but if you go on our website, you know, you'll get the full list. How does it come? It's a French tradition, okay? It was the French citizenship before Mumia was given to Picasso. So it's not a regular basis. It depends. It's basically voted by the city council. Of Paris, okay. Mostly supported by the communist group and the communist official and some of the socialists, Communists have always been more supportive. But it's part of a long French tradition, you know. That's what I used to answer to the journalist in Philadelphia when they asked me the question, what is a French woman doing in the very Philly story? And I used to answer, I'm not prejudiced against you. It's not that. It's a long French tradition. We come here to support Mumia, the way we've been supported the Rosenberg, and the way we've been supporting Angela Davis and many more prisoners in Palestinian, in Iran, and so on. It's a long French tradition, you know, I would say. And we happen to be here or there according to the story of our life, I would say, you know. I thought that these people didn't deserve to be treated the way they were. Exactly, but they were good people. Of course, they're vocal. I don't agree 100% with them. They know me, you know. Okay, but they don't deserve to be treated this way. They don't deserve to have their children killed, to be, okay, to be sent to prison for 100 to 100, and they're good people. They've always been helping other people. So you can find them, they're too vocal and all that, but you can't kill people just to make them be silent, right. You know. This picture here is a picture of Phil Africa, you know, because I've been visiting all of them since 1995. I've been visiting Mumia, of course, but every year I visited the women. That's why I wrote the book about the women. And I visited all the moved prisoners, all of them, you know, some more than others, but all of them, you know, Phil and Delbert, of course. My grandson wanted to visit Phil and Delbert. And my grandson is the tall guy, tall fair guy, which is turned bald at 20. Okay, I took all my grandchildren to the US when they turned 17 or 18, and they all came and see the Moore family. And Thibault, my grandson, when he was 18, he wanted to visit the prisoners, because I said, I'm visiting the prisoners. You don't have to come, okay? Right. So I want to come, you know. And I said, well, you know, Phil and Delbert, I don't know if you have met them. Have you ever met them? It's very difficult to understand, especially Phil. Worse than Pam, you know, which is, you know, for a foreigner, it's difficult, you know. And I say, you know, Phil is lovely, but I don't understand half of what he says. And he said, Grandma, don't worry. And you know what? When we got together, my grandson was so fair hair, so blonde, you know, and these two guys were so dark, okay? We just came together and talked and laughed and joked. Right. I felt jealous. I mean, I don't know why, you know.
Yeah, they were able to connect.
They were just able to connect in spite of a language barrier, you know. And that was very nice.
So you visited the MOVE members in prison, and you actually wrote a book about their experience.
For the sisters, yes, for the sisters.
About the women's prison in the States, and in Pennsylvania, right? This was Spring Hills?
No, Cambridge Spring.
Oh, Cambridge
next
Spring
to the Canadian border.
Okay.
It's a very, very long trip. We used to visit Mumia and after go to visit the sisters. And the thing is, we had to be free people, because we had to be free people to take them to the visiting room, you know. Okay. So I started visiting them with the family up to 1999, till I convinced French people to go all the way up there. Because my idea was, the more French people I brought with to visit Mumia on death row, was very difficult, and to visit the sisters and the brothers, the more likely their case would be known, and the more support they would have. That was my naive point of view, you know. But anyway, we had many visits, many visits, and I learned a lot about American prison. I was very shocked.
Have you visited people in French prisons?
Of course, because we showed the Mumia film in a couple of French prisons. Okay. You know, the film about Mumia, my whole life in prison, you know. We showed it in not that many, but maybe 3 or 5 prisons.
In the French officials, they let you show that
in France. Yes, in France and in Brittany and in Lyon. Okay, it's complicated. Okay, it's not that easy. Basically, the main way to get this into prison is to work with what I call him, the kind of cultural professional, the man in charge of activities in the prison. You know. And so some are committed, some are not. And yes, we did show it. And what struck me, we did it in Lyon also. I would say 5 or 6, not that many, but a couple of them. And what struck me, we were showing this film, and after we're talking, you know, Not that many people came. Some prisoners came just because they were in one building, wanted to see their friend from the other building. So it was not that many people, maybe 30 or 50, sometimes very bad condition, you know, and the film was not very good. But the thing is, I realized that we had a discussion after the film, you know, what kind of question. They were very happy, the guys. It's only guys. I didn't manage to get into the women's prison in Rennes. I tried to, but I didn't manage to. I realized suddenly that we are discussing and that the guards were in the room, because we had guards in the room, you know, 2 or 3 guards. And I realized we just ignore them. We didn't care about them, you know. And I remember this woman guard, I think it was in French, say, "Oh, thank you. It was such a good film," you know.
Really?
And I remember the guards in prison in the US, you know, when you can't even go to the loo without asking permission. We're not supposed to hug them, you're not supposed to do this, you're not supposed to do that.
It's very high security.
Yeah, and that's where I realized that French prisons are not perfect. I don't like this prison system, but anyway, you manage to do a couple of things, and this prisoner would come and thank us and say, "Oh, I would like to go to the US after, and I would like to do this, and thank us for, you know, coming around." And that was very moving, you know. I wanted to know about Mumia, and I don't know. I can give you another example about the British prison. I've not visited British prison, but we used to work with Selma James. Selma James, her husband wrote Black Jacobins. You may have read it. It's about black people in the West Indies. Very beautiful book. Selma is a great woman. She's a feminist, you know. She's in her 90s now. And when Mumia published his book about jailhouse lawyer, she decided that every British prisoner should have it. So she organized a meeting in the House of Lords, because Lord was a former director of the British prison, something like this, you know. And she convinced him that every British lawyer should have a copy of Jailhouse Lawyer. And so we had this ceremony at the House of Lords. She invited me.
In the British Parliament?
In the British Parliament,
wow.
In the British House of Lords.
Wow.
And we went to this House of Lords. I've never been to the House of Lords before. Thank you, Mumia. I keep telling Mumia, that's a success story. I've never met so many people before, you know. And went to House of Lords with his Lord, you know, and to have a kind of, you know, talk and discussion. And he was telling us how every British prisoner will get, you know, jailhouse lawyer.
So every British prisoner has Mumia's book?
Exactly.
Wow.
You know, it was very impressive, you know. And but I must admit that Mumia told us something a year ago. Guess what? In this library in my prison, in the library, there are copies of my books. They have copies of my books. And you know, Mumia started to say, "But you know what? 90% of them can't read. So they can put the books on the shelf. Nobody's going to read them."
That it's really amazing to hear that, you know, he has this large international support, because to be quite honest, especially in the States, it can be very ostracizing to admit that you support Mumia. I've seen careers destroyed by that fact, and in fact, one of his attorneys was denied a position with the Justice Department due to his work on a case, and other people have lost professional opportunities for being associated with this cop killer. So how do you respond
I remember
to people who say that to you?
the Agdebil story.
Right.
And now there's this woman who should be appointed, was Clark her name?
Christine Clark.
Christine Clark.
Correct.
She's having the same problem. And we never met Agdebil, as you know, as Mumia supporter. We never met Christine Clark either, you know. Never had any contact with her. I'm sure we maybe never even heard about Mumia, you know. So it's very, very unfair. Well, the thing is, when you are a MOVE supporter, not here, okay, no problem. But in Philly, you're easily scared. Easily scared, you know. You've got to be very careful.
Right.
Since 2000, to be honest, since 2000, that's to say when we had this Republican convention in Philadelphia for the Bush election, I was dead sure that it would be elected. There was so much police and helicopter everywhere, and there were so many barriers around the convention center. Since when I saw the way things were going, I told the MOVE family, I say, I'm not going to protest anymore. I'm going to do all the work. but I won't march with you because I want to keep my passport.
Oh, wow.
I want to be useful. If I want to be useful, I must be able to move from the US to France.
Which passport were you concerned about?
My French passport.
Oh.
Because I must say, every time I go to the US, when I get to the custom, especially if I land in Philly, I'm not welcome.
Oh, they have you on a list. They know who you are.
Exactly.
Oh,
they have me on the list. It's question again, what are you doing here? Why are you coming? At the time, I used to spend 3 or 4 months in Philly. Used to come 4 or 5 times a year. Visit Mumia, to do my rating, to go to march, to protest, to go to court. And I was not welcome at all. It was all nice and put my passport into a machine and say, what are you doing? Why are you coming again? You came 2 months ago. Why are you coming again?
Yeah.
So a different answer. I've always be very careful because they double check. They ask you the question, and after they ask you the same question again. So at the time when I was younger, I would say, oh, my boyfriend is living in Philly, so that's his address and so on. That's the way I got out. After I say, which is true, I'm teaching American studies, so I need to come here to write and for investigation and all that. But it was always very scary to get through the custom. They never threw me back because being French, they don't want things to be they want to make a scandal or something like this, but I'm never welcome.
Wow, that's
it's better in New York, but in Philly I'm never welcome. They know who I am.
So how do you respond to people who flat out accuse you of supporting a cop killer? Because people believe that he's guilty and he's where he should be. So how do you respond to someone who says that you support a cop killer?
Well, I always answer, but because we're not supposed to know anything about the move case, okay? So I always answer, but I've been to court, listening to testimonies since 1995. I've read all the investigation and all the courts file about Mumia, and that they never proved that he was guilty. That's my answer. And otherwise, I always say that I'm French and a French, activist, and we support American prisoners, we support, Iranian prisoners and prisoners all over the world. So that's just French history. But I always say that I know the case, that I wrote about the case, I wrote a book about the case, I've been reading all the books that you can see on the shelf, all the Mumia books, all of them, all the Move books too also. And I've been working with Lynn Washington, with the guy who wrote Killing Time, who's a very good friend too. Dave Lindorf, all these people who have been investigating the case thoroughly, and there is no evidence that Mumia killed this cop. And now the question we're trying to work with Noel, and I think the Mumia supporters should work in it, they should change the question, they should change the focus, they should try to find who killed Faulkner. And the recent book from Veronica Jones, you may have read Veronica Jones' book.
No, I've never read her book.
You should really read it. That's the one which is over there. That's the one which I translated into French.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't have a copy, but I translate. It's incredible. She just showed that, because Veronica Jones, which is one of the witnesses who recanted.
And she died.
She died.
Right.
She died, but before dying, she told her life to her sister.
Right.
And her sister, she came to France 2 years ago. We invited her. She wrote the story of her sister once she passed away. She had promised to do it. And when you read the book, because in fact, she was a prostitute when she was young, but she has a very hard life anyway. She had been never working for another man or something like this. She never did pimp, And she slept with Faulkner. And and she saw him.
Daniel Faulkner, who's the cop that Mumia's...
Exactly. So when you see the wife saying, "Oh, my husband," and so, he slept with her, and she saw him the night he was killed.
Wow.
And she knew something was wrong. She has been persecuted. She's been raped by the Philly police because they knew her. And it became obvious from 1 or 2 books like this that he was killed by the police. It's really a case of police corruption. And
surprise.
And that was a time of high police corruption. And I think we should try to start the investigation. Noel Hanrahan wanted to do it, you know. Who killed Faulkner? And the best way to show that Mumia is innocent.
Right, is to find the real killer.
Yeah.
You mentioned the French support for different political prisoners
Yeah.
all around the world. Are you aware of any French political prisoners or, prisoners incarcerated in France who have maintained their innocence and
yes, George Abdallah is the George Abdallah.
George Abdallah.
Yes, he's from Lebanon. He's a Lebanese.
Okay.
And he always claimed he's been innocent, but because of
what was he accused of doing?
Terrorist attack or something like that. I think so.
Is he incarcerated for life?
Not exact, George Ibrahim Abdallah, okay. No, but he's a member of Lebanese Revolutionary Army. He's been in jail since 1994, sentenced in 1996. And yes, he's sentenced to life, but he could be released. But it's totally political. But it's a big case, okay? And he should be released. It's basically because there is no agreement, because I think the French government, whatever it is, and the Lebanese.
So he was accused of terrorism. That's interesting that he actually has the possibility of being released. As you know, well, first of all, America has a death penalty, and Mumia was originally sentenced to death, even though his sentence was commuted. But France doesn't have the death penalty, and they rarely sentence people to life. So someone could be convicted for terrorism and still get out.
First sentenced to life, but they never stay. They always released before, and that's what the case of George Abdallah is a very political case, because he should have been released a couple of years ago already.
And he's still there, which is rare.
Yeah, which is very rare.
So what about if someone was convicted of killing a police officer? Would they be sentenced to life here?
No, but that's a big discussion presently, because many policemen have been killed recently, you know.
Yeah.
So they may change the law, I don't know. It's very complicated. Even when it is worse than policemen, which is murder of children, you know. Patrick Henry, for instance, was the first man who escaped the death penalty, because it was 79. It was before the abolition of the death penalty, you know. So it was one of big Badinter case, and he managed to make sure he was not executed. He was just sentenced to life, and he was released a couple of years ago. The murder of Patrick Henry.
After being convicted of killing a kid, he was released. Wow.
Well, and as there's been lots of talk, people were very much against it, and finally, I think he's been so long in prison that he just went back to prison. He had a job, you know, in a printing shop or something like this. He stole a couple of things, and I think obviously he couldn't live outside, you know, because there's a lot of hostility still, I must say.
He was institutionalized at that point. Are you an abolitionist? Are you against prison? Or do you think that some people do belong in prison?
I'm an abolitionist, but you can't do it from, from night to morning or morning to night. It takes a lot of legislation meanwhile. But what I do think, and there's a lot of people working on it in French, is that especially for medium cases, people should work outside, have a job outside, you know, at the same time, you know.
What type of job? Prison labor or?
No, working outside, working in shops, experiences like experiment like this. They've got a job and they go back to prison at night, but they will work outside and mingle with people, you know, because when you visit a prison, it's awful. You've got Prison de la Santé here. When you see all these people in cages, it's not the way to solve the problem.
There's no rehabilitation. It's just really punishment. You know, there are several goals of sentencing, and one of them is supposed to be rehabilitation. But the American system currently, you know, it's really just a punishing mechanism. There's no way to reform these people.
There is rehabilitation here, but it's complicated because you always got the case, you know, about the man who is just what you call en permission, okay, and who killed someone and so on. So And it just now we're in a crisis. It's chaos here.
Right.
By French standards, it's chaos here. You know, we never had people killed or slaughtered like this since the last war.
Right.
So that's something new. What is happening to us since the Bataclan and Charlie Hebdo, and
Right.
so I think they should be. Prison is not the answer.
Right.
It's outdated. It's outdated. But we must find a new legislation, a new organization.
Right.
But that's something we should really aim at.
Okay. So, how did Mumia obtain a street named after him in Saint Denis? So you explained to me how he obtained citizenship. You know, that's something that was voted on by city council, and that was really to kind of signify the French support for him. But to go as far as to give him a street, some people might think that that's actually, you know, honoring him.
Yeah,
in a way.
That's what we're doing.
Okay, so it is to honor him.
Yes,
So
for us is an example, okay, of resisting to injustice. You know, and it's basically in communist city.
Right.
In fact, there's two streets named after Mumia. One in Saint Denis, which is the most famous and most popular.
The one in Saint Denis.
Yeah, you saw it.
Right.
You went there,
So
okay.
what's the other one?
In Bobigny.
Oh, okay.
Bobigny was a small one, you know, and his brother and his son, Jamal, came, you know, when the street was named after him. The thing is, when you change mayor, when it's no longer a communist city, it's more complicated, you know, it's more complicated. But they still kept the name, you know, still, okay? Villejuif has been very, very active in support of Mumia.
Wow.
And there's a new mayor, and they are going to work with us. They came to Concord, and it's mostly a city councillor, you know, who would just put the pressure so for something done, you know. And Alon, near Le Mans also, we used to have a huge poster of Mumia on the city hall front wall. Same thing in Bobigny, there was a portrait of Mumia for years in the city hall in Bobigny. And some of the plant trees, you know, it's just a variety of things.
Right. So, how would you respond of people who say that, you know, you've done more for Mumia than for causes here in France, or for, you know, maybe similarly situated or disadvantaged people in France? They question, you know, why the support for a foreigner when you may actually have the opportunity to make more difference at home.
No, I wouldn't agree, because we all work together. All of us, we work together. Genepi is the main support group for French prisoners.
Okay.
And we've been working together, showing film and things like this. And we're a different group of people, but we are connected. Sooner or later, we all get connected, you know.
Right.
I was member of, I'm still member of a big, very, very active group, which is ECPM, Together Against the Death Penalty. Have you met them? Very good people. And we organize Congress every 4 years, okay? And we gather with people from around the world. But the main group in France is Genepi, and it's different in a way, because in prison they can go to school, they can graduate. Philippe Maurice, for instance, which is a very interesting case.
In French prisons.
Yeah, in French prison. In French prison, okay. Yeah. Philippe Maurice, which should have been sentenced to death, who was sentenced to death, should have been executed in 1981. It was just his conviction was commuted because it was the abolition of the death penalty.
Right.
It's the last one who should have been executed, and he did kill cops in or safety guards. He was, you know, breaking into a shop with his brother, his elder brother, and so on. And he was guilty, definitely guilty, you know. And he was about to be executed. And in 1981, abolition of the death penalty, and his sentence was commuted. And I remember this case because graduated in history while in prison. He thought he would never get out, you know. He graduated in prison in history, and he even wrote his PhD. And I remember because I read in the newspaper that in Tours library they brought him from prison with, you know, professors, so he can have his jury for his PhD, and he got it. And finally he was released, something like, was it 10 years ago, something like this.
Right.
And he's teaching, and he wrote a book about his life, you know. And we invited him at Fête de l'Humour, something like this. He came and talk about himself. But he said he doesn't want to talk about this part of his life anymore. He wrote a book about it, you know. His elder brother committed suicide in prison, you know.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And now he's very, very good at medieval history, okay, specialized in medieval history. And I remember when, you know, was the jury in Tours, you know, was taken out of prison, and I know a couple of my colleagues who went to teach in prison, you know.
Right.
They go and teach in prison, and
so in other words, the U.S. or prisoners in the U.S. need to support more than France because of the conditions and both the justice system and the prison.
Yes, are very cruel,
Right.
and it's really racial discrimination. Of course, if you go to prison here, you will see more Algerian people or Moroccan people than French people, maybe. I agree, you know. Nothing is perfect here. No country is perfect. And I will never forget when a country like France, we switched from democracy to fascism in 1939.
Yeah.
We have been under the fascist government for 4 years. So it can happen in any country. You must really be very comprehensive.
Right.
But still doesn't mean you can do things, you know.
Right.
And every time we get a chance to do something here, we do it just the same, you know.
Right.
That's why I visited prison. But I think the American penal system is very unfair. Because you have got to prove that you are innocent.
Yeah.
Here you've got to prove, the court must prove that you're guilty, you know.
There's a difference in the
Yeah,
burdens.
and yes, and you get lawyer and you get money, and you don't have to pay for the way we have to pay for Mumia. We have been sending so much money to Mumia, you know. I don't think the prison system is good, but it can be better or it can be worse.
Right.
And I was struck by that's why I wrote a book about women in prison. And I was a friend of Kitty Watterson, who wrote a big book about women in prison. She wrote a lot. And I thought it was also so unfair, you know. The way they treated women was worse than the way they treated men. But why did I write about prison in the US? I think I write it in my biography of Mumia. You can have it if you want. The first time I went to an American prison, just happened like that. I was with a friend from an anarchist from Philly, the airspace, and they had this Book Through Bars association, you know.
Yeah.
And they asked me if I wanted to go with them. Of course, I went with them, you know, and handed in the north of New York State, and I said I didn't want to go in. It was a male prison. I thought it was not proper for me to just come and just watch these people, but we got stuck in a I don't know what kind of place, you know, where you are just, you know, the gate opens and you're stuck in and you must wait for the other gate to open. And I was there and I saw the place where they all work, you know, kind of working place in the prison, you know. It was an old prison, old bricks, and with bars. And between each bars there was a black face. Between each bar there was a black face. I couldn't believe it. And they were watching me, you know, because and I was trying to hide because I was so ashamed of myself in a way. I don't know why, you know, but I was so shocked. I always, till the day I die, I remember all these black faces watching me, you know.
Right.
This, and when you go to death row, I don't know if you've got to Pittsburgh death row. They have got these small windows like this, very small, very narrow, and when you go out with this long hole, you know, and you can see the cells, and you can see a hand waving because they see you can't see them, you know, waving to say I'm here, you know, and that's really, really shocked me, you know.
Wow.
That's really shocked me, you know. Just I'm shocked when I see La Santé in Paris, you know, but that's.
What do you think is the most pressing social injustice issue in France right now?
I don't know, because everything is so politicized. I think we are not the worst country in the world. What I really appreciate, although it's not perfect, it's our teaching system, our nursery school. I think that politicians have been very weak facing the fundamentalist Muslim minority, because they are a minority. Many Muslim people are very good people, you know, but it's just always a problem with theocracy, using the religion to control the people.
All right.
And I think you've got to be fair, but you can't accept, but you know, this kind of hatred system, you know. So what's the injustice? I don't know. It's difficult to say. I think we've got of course there is discrimination. There always been discrimination, and it's part of human mind, you know. You think you're better if you think that the other one is not as good as you.
Right.
Just like the poorest white American citizen with, you know, in deep Texas will think he's better than African American, you know.
Yeah,
But
they'll
so-
be sadly mistaken, but that might be what they
okay,
think.
but that's what they think, you know. I think we're doing the best we can with what we have. We're only human beings. We must be very humble. I think the two good points here, and that's why maybe so many people are coming here also, is that to have a, not perfect, but a fair educational system, free college. Of course, you can go to private school, but free college, and a good social security system, an old age pension system. Afterwards, it's not easy when you live because we're starting to have ghetto, which is something new here. We never had them. But at the same time, it's much more lively because I've been living in, of course, that was 15 years ago. I've been in Les Yvelines, between Mount La Jolie and Les Mureaux. Maybe you know this area, which is very tough, facing Flint-les-Vignes. But there is, of course, there is violence. Of course, there is injustice. But there is a lot, it's very lively. You're not terrified as when you are in Westwood Philly or in North Philly, you know. In the mirror, you've got to be careful.
Well, to be fair, and I understand what you mean, you know, as a black person from the States. Even as a woman, I'm not necessarily safe. You know, some people they only look at the police brutality committed against black men and not women. But as we saw with Breonna Taylor and
that's what I wrote
others,
about. Yes.
Yeah, you know, it can happen to black women as well.
Yeah.
So I do have safety concerns, and I don't necessarily have the same safety concerns here in France, but I also acknowledge that maybe that's because my experience as a black woman is kind of protected in a way here, whereas others from other backgrounds, such as maybe an Algerian woman who's number one Algerian, and if she's Muslim, she may not feel as safe as I feel here in France, because especially if she wears a hijab, she might feel like people want to snatch it off her head, or
I
people
very
wanna-
much object to the hijab. I think it's I'm too much of a feminist. We have
Right.
been fighting so hard here, so I will be biased. I will never be biased. But we have been fighting so hard here to have our women's rights. You know, we are much behind our American wives. You know, when I got married in '63, I couldn't have my own bank account. I needed my husband's permission. You need husband permission for everything, you know. And we couldn't vote till we were 21, but could work but not vote. And there was no rape between wife and husband. And we still had this kind of stupid joke, you know, which my husband enjoyed, even he was a scholar, you know, saying, you know, the basic joke was, you can beat your wife. If you don't know why, she will know why. You know, we had all this kind of, you know, jokes,
Right.
just jokes, but it meant a lot, you know. And we had no birth control. I had my two daughters by the age of 19 after. My doctor was very good and he gave me the pill. But that means you could have as many children as you wanted. You had to have abortion, but it was totally illegal. And I went through all this, and my friends too, you know. So I can't accept the idea that for me, I may be wrong, okay. I may be wrong, but Muslim women are very split also, you know. There are lots of Muslim women who just are very split about the issue, you know. But I would never accept the idea that a man can rule your life.
Right.
And my friend Yarafa, my former student, she's in Mali, and she's desperate because she's a Malian woman. I've always been very independent. It was a matriarch. And with Muslim religion spreading, men are taking power, which is a perversion, which is not the basic religion, the basic principle of Muslim people, you know. It's just used, you know, for political control.
Well, yeah.
So it's a very controversial
I
issue.
understand. You know, I personally, I would never wear a hijab. I'm going to wear whatever I want. No one can say that. But at the same time, you know, I think that feminism means that women should do what they want.
Is it what they want, or is it what men want them for men?
Women are saying that they want to wear it.
Come on.
How can feminists champion, say, prostitution? Because we're at a point in society where sex workers are being more and more protected, and people are saying, you know, women have a right to their body, which means that they can even be sex workers if they want to, which they can. And let's be honest, who's really getting pleasure out of sex work? The man. The woman is getting money, but the pleasure is really going to the man. So how can we accept that, but then say that a woman can't wear a hijab?
I don't know, because there's lots of movement with prostitutes in the 70s and so on. Well, I think I have nothing against prostitution. The only thing I think it should be acknowledged as a real job. That's a real choice.
Yeah,
and
but who's getting the pleasure out of that, really?
But the woman should be in charge of herself.
Well, I see that with the hijab. I think that that's a decision. I might disagree with it, but I see that as a woman in control of herself and doing what she wants to. Well, we can have a whole conversation about that, and I'll come back. We'll talk about this because I have a lot to say.
I can imagine. I had a lot of fight with my American friends. Okay, you say you're a racist. Women can do what they want to. I say I'm a feminist, and I'll die feminist. But
it's definitely a complicated issue. So how can people support Mumia right now in his current battle to be released for compassion?
So they can join the collective Mumia Abu-Jamal, okay? And we have a website, okay, Libérons Mumia. You go there, you have all vindication. Okay. You have all vindication, you can subscribe, you can make donation, you can have the books from Mumia.
You have this mask for sale, correct? How much is the mask?
I don't remember.
Okay.
Jackie is the money man, okay? I'm not sure we still have it. We used to have stamps also, but you may still have them. But books about Mumia, records about Mumia, films by Mumia and for Mumia. And you can join us if you live near Paris at Concorde the first Wednesday of the month. Now it's free. During the curfew, it's free. 3 p.m.
Well, curfew is ending in a few weeks. So.
Yes, so it used to be at 6 p.m. And we are the only group allowed to rally Place de la Concorde. The only French group, okay? And we always had permission by the police. They just cancelled it 2 weeks ago, but we came on the Saturday. And another time during COVID also. And the thing is, our friends from Together Against the Death Penalty, even Amnesty, they asked for permission to rally in Concorde, and the Paris police said no, it's the Mumia place.
All right. Oh, wow.
It's a Mumia place. And once we forgot to ask permission, because we asked 2 weeks in advance, and the police called the guy in charge of asking permission and said, aren't you gathered for Mumia this month? Because you didn't ask permission. And it was the police calling, okay?
And to tell you to come on and protest. Wow.
So that's why it's quite symbolic. And this is our mail, you can contact us by email. Okay. Basically, we send information to 7,000 people on almost a weekly basis. Okay. It depends on what's according. We translate the document from the US, we send them, we put them online, and we send all the information.
Right.
Collectif Libérons Mumia.
Okay. Well, I'll be sure to share that information, and I'll list the website so the listeners can support. Yeah. Thank you for speaking to me today. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
It's a pleasure to see you. Ciao. See you soon.
Thank you.